Welcome to Cloud Builder X. I'm Raju Karmuri, and in this video, we'll be creating a bucket along with its folders and subfolders inside it, and we'll also be setting up API gateway. So let's go to the AWS console and create the bucket. Okay, I log into my AWS account, and this is the console homepage. Let's go to S3. Let's create a bucket. So the important thing about the bucket is that the name has to be unique across the global network. So if you create a bucket here, the name has to be unique in the entire world. However, the bucket will be stored only in the region that you specify. So for example, here I am on US East Ohio East 2. So the bucket will be stored inside this region itself, even though the name is unique globally. So let's create a bucket name. Let's block the public access and let us enable versioning so that we'll know different types of files that are uploaded to S3. If the versioning is not enabled, if the file has the same name, the file will be replaced on S3. But if the versioning is when the versioning is enabled, even if the file name is same, it will be stored as a different version. And by default, we'll have SSE S3 encryption coming in with S3, and we'll keep it as it is. And let's create. Okay. And like we discussed, let us create 3 different subfolders inside the main bucket: CardioCare, NeuroPulse, and OncoTrack. Remember that the folder name is case sensitive, and we should not have any slash at the end, because by default, when you create a folder, it comes with a slash. If you see, it has a slash here. Yeah, let's create new and other subfolders as well, like we discussed here: new process, processing, and failed. So I'm going to create new processing, processed, and failed. Okay, we can pause the video and create other subfolders for other programs as well. Okay, I've created all the subfolders for all the programs. Now let's discuss about the API gateway setup. So first, let's create a REST API on the API gateway. Okay, this is my API gateway console, and let's go ahead and create an API. So there are several ways you can create an API, and let's focus on REST API and build it. So when creating a REST API, we can create it from scratch, or we can clone it from another AWS account, and we can import it from an existing API in the same account. So we have something called OpenAPI 3 or Swagger that contains the API details of an existing API, and we can just import it here. Or the API gateway comes with default API settings. We can use that as well. But for now, we'll create a new API from scratch, and let's name it as file handler. And we'll keep the endpoint as regional and IP address type as IPv4. Let's create it. So before I create the resources, what I like to do is I like to set up the CloudWatch logs and also the binary type settings for the API. So by default, the API gateway settings, it doesn't come with any logging group here. So I created a role, API gateway logs role. This role will have a policy to push the logs to CloudWatch. And I copied the same ARN to this so that we can push the logs to CloudWatch. As a developer, it is important that you track whatever the error that you encounter on API gateway. And therefore, I created this log group on the CloudWatch. So when I create the log group and set it up to API gateway, by default, this log group will be created. And when you see it, it says CloudWatch logs enabled for API gateway. And after this, whatever the API you create, a new log group will be created for each API. If you see, there is an existing log group that was created for my another API. So it has all the logs that it contains. So if there is any error like this URL syntax error, or anything illegal expressions or something like that. You can track all the logs of the API gateway on the CloudWatch like this. And the other thing is setting up the binary media types. So we want to upload any kind of file through API gateway to S3. So it is important that we set up the binary media types. So by default, if you see, it shows image/JPEG, and like this, we can have application/PDF or any kind of media. For now, we want to upload any kind of file. So therefore, we'll set it up as //star and save it. And this is the URL that is generated for this particular API, and we'll be using it later. So now let's go to the resources and create the resources. Okay. In the resources, let's keep upload and let's enable cross-origin resource sharing because we'll be using React frontend and we do not want to have any cross-origin resource sharing issues on the web browser. And we can easily upload the file from the React to API gateway without having to worry about the resource problems. I'll enable it and I'll create a resource. And after this, if you remember, I was telling you about a Lambda function that has 3 different actions. So when we are generating a pre-signed URL, I said that we'll be creating 3 different actions on the Lambda function. So to accommodate this on the API gateway, let's go ahead and create a resource under the name action. So if I put something in the flower brackets like this, it means that it accepts any kind of name as a parameter on the API gateway. So this action can be anything. So this action can be generate pre-signed URL or get metadata or generate download URL. So if a variable is changing like this, we need to keep it in square brackets. So it will be stored inside this path upload/action. And under the action, if you remember my S3 bucket, we will have the complete path. So CardioCare and new, if I create, see the properties, there's the UI like the bucket name and program type and new. So we are not going to use the bucket name on the API gateway because we are using a Lambda function and action. So we can ignore this, but we'll create program type. So enable course and then subfolder and the file. Okay. And this URL path will be upload, action, program type, subfolder, and the file name. So the reason why we are not giving the bucket name here is because the Lambda function will take the S3 details and will generate the URL based on the S3 details. So we don't have to worry about creating bucket name here in the resource. So next, we got the complete path where we want to upload the file in S3. Let's go ahead and create a method. So our media type, we are going to get it. So let's keep the method type as get, and we'll be using a Lambda function, and we'll be creating a Lambda function here. So I already have one Lambda function, but I want to create a new one. So let me go to my Lambda functions. So let's create one from scratch. The function name will be standard file handler. And let's use Python 3.13 and x86-64. And we'll create a new role for this Lambda function. So keep in mind that we will be using this role, whatever that is created for the other functionalities. So the role will be like standard file handler role RYXGY726. So let's go ahead and create this. Okay, our Lambda function is created. We'll write the code in some time, but before writing the code, let's attach the API gateway to the Lambda function. So if you see, let me copy the ARM. Okay, it showed up. And we'll keep all the settings as default like this and create the method. So if you see, the request paths are taken here: action, file name, program type, and subfolder. And we also need to make sure that we create integration URL path parameters. So let's go and create the URL path parameters. So add path parameter, name will be action, and the mapping would be method dot request dot file dot action. And likewise, we'll add other parameters as well. Okay, I added all the URL path parameters, and we need to understand the difference between the Lambda proxy integration and without proxy integration. So let me go to Google and search for Lambda proxy integration API gateway and open this. Okay, if you see here in the second paragraph, it says the Lambda proxy integration, when a client submits an API request, API gateway passes to the integrated Lambda function and event object. So API gateway sends an event object to Lambda function, except that the order of request parameters is not preserved. It doesn't matter what kind of order we send the path parameters, it will send it as an event object. This request data includes request headers, query string parameters, URL path variables, payload, and API configuration data. So the Lambda proxy integration contains this request data, which has request headers, query string parameters, URL path variables, payload, and API configuration. And I click on this, it sends everything. Query string parameters, multi-value query string parameters, request context, domain name, path, and everything. But we don't need all these things to be sent from the API gateway to Lambda. We are only sending from the React the S3 path where we need to upload the file. And that path has only the path parameters. That's what we have defined in API gateway. So therefore, we'll be using only the path parameters. And let's copy this in the path parameters. And that is the reason why we are not selecting Lambda proxy integration. We are doing it without Lambda proxy integration. So now we need to set up the mapping templates, because we need to map the event object sent from API gateway to Lambda function, and it is sent as a JSON application dot slash JSON. And if I come down and click learn more, the template body is written in velocity template language. So this is a different thing. The velocity template language, it uses the JSON format, but it has a dollar symbol for defining the variables and properties. We have variables for all the path parameters inside API gateway. We need to define all these path parameters as input variables. So if you come to this documentation and see the input variables, the way we define the input variables is like this: input.parse. It returns a map of all request parameters. And if there is anything inside, it returns the value of a method request parameter from the path or query string or header value. So we are sending the path. So therefore, we'll be using these input parameters, and the values will be sending it to Lambda function as an event object. And we have 4 parameters like this. So therefore, from the Lambda proxy integration JSON file, let's define path parameters. And this is a JSON. So let me create a JSON. And I have path parameters. And we are sending a bunch of 4 path parameters that were defined above. And the first one is action. And the action will be sent as input palm. You can pause the video and you can add the rest of them. Okay, I added all the path parameters in the body. So let's save this. Okay, I saved it. And now if I go to my Lambda function, the API gateway is connected to the Lambda function. Okay, now if I click on API gateway, it shows me under triggers, which means that the Lambda function is connected to the API gateway, and you can see the file handler link is here. I click on open link, and you can access the API that we have created. And we'll click on the details. We can see all the details of the file handler. The API type is REST. We did not set up any authorization yet. Binary media types is */*. It's a get method, and the resource path is this. The next step is for us to connect the Lambda function to S3 bucket. So in order to do that, we will be using the Lambda role that we have configured in the permissions. If you see, we have this role. So this role is for the Lambda. We'll be using the same role to connect to the API gateway and also to the S3 bucket. This is the best way we can create, we can connect the API gateway and S3 bucket using least privileges. So this role will be connected to Lambda, will be connected to S3, it will be connected through access points and also to the API gateway as a trust policy. Let's go ahead and create the permissions using that role. So my bucket policy is here. Click on edit, add a statement, and we want to allow service role access. The principal would be the ARN for this. And in the actions, let's add get, put, and delete objects. Okay, and the resources would be the subfolders. Okay, we also need to give list bucket statements as well. In order to do that, we need to create a separate statement ID for this because list bucket is at the bucket level, whereas get object, put object, and delete object are at the object level inside the S3. So list bucket has to be given as a separate prefix conditions for all the three subfolders of CardioCare, NeuroPulse, and OncoTrack. I have copied it already, so let me copy that and paste it here. Okay, and we are giving this service role list bucket for this bucket, and the prefix is this 3. Let me go ahead and save changes. Okay, the bucket policy is created. Now let's create access points. Click on the access point, give this CardioCare IP, it's internet, block public access, and add the bucket policy. We give allow service role access. The principal is same service role. And we'll give S3 get object, and also delete object. And the resource is the access point ARN here. And each access point is created at a bucket level. So we have created this access point for CardioCare subfolder. Therefore, we have to give the CardioCare here. And in order to do that, I need to give it as an object here. S3 recognizes only the objects, whereas access point is created at the bucket level. Therefore, object keyword must be given here and my subfolder. This is the way we give the subfolder granular access using this object keyword. Let me go ahead and create an access point. Okay, I'll pause the video and you can create other access points as well. Okay, I've created all the access points. And if you see carefully, there is an access point alias for each corresponding access point. Let me open one of the access points. Okay, in the properties, if you see, there is a URI and there's an ARN and also an alias. So we can use both ARN and also alias to connect to the access points. And these access points are nothing but the replacement for the bucket name. So we can use alias or ARN to connect to the bucket as well. And this is the secure way of connecting to the S3 bucket and also hiding the S3 bucket details. So if we click on objects, you can see the same subfolders inside this access point as well. But the permissions for this access point is set up only for CardioCare. So this way, we are dealing with CardioCare subfolder through this access point. Likewise, I go to the other access points as well and see the permissions. This is dealing with NeuroPulse, and you can see all the subfolders inside it, but the permissions for this access point are set to only NeuroPulse. So that's it. Now let's go to the role and make sure that we connect the role also to the S3 bucket access points, because using the role, we are connecting to the S3 bucket, and bucket also, the role also needs to have access points set up inside it. Okay, let me go ahead and create an inline policy. I'll choose S3, I choose a JSON. Yeah, this will be S3. Yeah. Okay, I've added the access point ARNs as well, and also for the list bucket, I've added the access points for all the three subfolders. Let me click on next. Create this policy, give the name as S3 access points policy. Create policy. And now our role, service role is connected to the S3 access points. And the next thing is we need to connect the service role to API gateway. Right now, the API gateway is connected to Lambda function, although the Lambda function is connected to a assumed role, but still we need to connect the API gateway to the role, and that can be done through the trust policy. So the trust policy, right now it is assuming the Lambda function. Along with that, let us add API gateway too. So now the API gateway is connected to this role. So to better understand, what I'm trying to do is the API gateway is a barrier between the React frontend and also the S3 bucket. So it should allow this particular role to connect to the S3 bucket. We are using this single role for connecting to S3 bucket, Lambda function, and API gateway. Therefore, the role should understand that it needs to connect to Lambda and also the API gateway. That's why in the trust policy, we are adding API gateway as well. Okay, that's it in this video. And in the next video, we'll be writing Lambda function code and we'll be testing it from API gateway. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.